And I am going to talk about how does coordinated specialty care fit into rural communities. So in regards to definition of a rural area, I read this from our toolkit that's listed in the references, and I thought, well, is there more to this definition? Was there an error? So no, I went on the Census Bureau website, and the Census Bureau defines rural as any population, housing, or territory not in an urban area. So essentially, you have to know what an urban area is to then be able to identify a rural area. So these two bullet points probably should be switched. So an urban area is an area at least 50,000 of at least 50,000 people, and an urban cluster is 2,500 to but less than 50,000. Any area outside of this is considered a rural area. And I imagine we could spend some more time on that definition, but we're going to move forward. So what does that look like in Ohio? So over 2 million Ohioans live in rural areas. And again, oftentimes we think of rural, and based on, maybe what we've read or our own experiences, we'll have this kind of narrow view of what that means. So I just want us to think that even within more homogeneous communities, that there still can be multiple identities within that community. So approximately 60,000 Amish people live in Ohio. Someone told me it was closer to 63,000, but they didn't have a good resource besides that they work in rural areas. But it makes sense that it probably is closer to 63,000 because this is an older number based on the last census data. Also, approximately 14,000 migrant farm workers are in Ohio. And again, this number is going to fluctuate, but it just for me made me think about, again, those multiple identities that are taking place in rural areas. I know some of my colleagues have heard me talk about numerous times that it's nothing worse than someone taking 2 buses or maybe having to pay someone to show up at an appointment and there's not an interpreter, for example. So just some things to think about as we're moving through the presentation. So in regards to stigma, I know this audience understands stigma, knows the impact that stigma can have, and that very public stigma. I was going to say we just had Halloween, but that was actually about 2 weeks ago. But I always think about those images that pop up during Halloween. I don't want to tell my age, but there's some of these movies, they just keep reappearing every Halloween cycle. And then also self-stigma, that's important, especially when you think about coordinated specialty care. When you're thinking about young adults, some of them might not have had some of the experiences that others have had, for example, being in a state hospital, for example, but they too, hear what people are saying, see the images, which can have an impact on self-esteem and self-worth, but also they are experiencing real life discrimination. Recently, again, talking to someone with lived experience, she was saying sometimes it feels like we get so stuck on only wanting to talk about stigma and not talking about the impact of real life discrimination. In my previous place of employment, I've had more than one colleague talk about most landlords were great. Most property managers were easy to work with, but there always would be 1 or 2 that would stand there in front of the case manager, in front of the individual with lived experience, and say things such as, I don't rent to people that have a mental illness. So that is, recognizing, we talk about people's, self-esteem and self-worth, recognizing that a lot of that is based on some of their real life experiences. Now, this used to be my car. And this is actually not my car, this picture. I couldn't find the pictures. I'm not sure what happened to them. I love this car. I miss this car. Racked up a lot of miles. I'm not doing an advertisement for Volkswagen, but that car did last forever. And I had this car during a time where I was in engagement case manager. So just as the name implies, individuals, for whatever reason, just hadn't been seen in about 3 months or so, and it was my job to try to go find them. And I remember being in this very homogenous community, so the small rural community, and then within the community, it was an even smaller community. And so in the spirit of transparency, I am this Black woman driving this very bright green car around in this circle. And so we had to have conversations. So when we're talking about stigma, oftentimes I would just want to talk about it. Like, what are your feelings if someone, sees my card here and they know I was just at their house or I was at their family member's house? And there might have been one person that had, some really good insight and said, well, maybe it'll help them see that it's okay. But it was, again, an opportunity to talk about some of that stigma, to talk about some of the past discrimination that individuals experience, and, talking about those barriers and the things that might have been keeping them from accessing treatment, or even once they maybe went to that initial intake appointment, why they had difficulties continuing to remain in treatment. So in regard to some concerns around coordinated specialty care in rural areas, workforce challenges, limited access to programs and resources, and as in many other communities, transportation consistently can be a barrier. Mingo and Crow, they talked about some themes. So they were looking at rural communities and mental health and, what does that look like? What are the concerns again in regards to people accessing in care and then also just remaining in care? One of the themes was faking it. Now, some individuals reported that the feeling they get from their community is that they're faking their signs and symptoms. And so, I thought about coordinated specialty care and what does that mean? Again, increasing that education, that awareness in the time of COVID, recognizing that that might look different than it did even in 2019, but just any opportunity that we have when we're in the community or on some type of virtual forum to be able to talk about those signs and symptoms, to raise awareness about first episode psychosis. Some individuals reported that they felt their community essentially might have acknowledged, like, okay, something's going on with the individual, but they just need to get over it. So again, one of the things that was highlighted, the importance of building partnerships. Specifically here, we have with primary care providers. And it made me think about how we're consistently stressing the importance of integrated care. And so, especially if it's a small community, if you have that trusted primary care provider, is there a way to build relationships? If individuals trust that person, then that person can also help with providing education awareness. And then that person also can be a potential referral resource as well. And then God is all I need. And I thought this was important. So we're not talking about the faith of the clinician, but we're talking about individuals that are coming in and maybe they've been told, just pray about it. And so within their culture, they're saying, yes, faith is important to me, but I feel like maybe I need some more, but I'm not necessarily getting that support. So strengthening relationships, again, with trusted faith leaders in the community might be an option. I've actually been at meetings where there were social workers, counselors, psychologists at the table with faith leaders. And in the county I was in, it was sponsored by the board, but it was held at a community center in the community. So when individuals are talking about various aspects of their culture, it doesn't have to be, it can be both and. So for them to see that it doesn't have to be one thing or another, that it can be both and that they can still have this significant and very important part of their culture while still engaging in coordinated specialty care in the community. So again, some of the interventions from the toolkit, I did think were interested, and I would love, at the end to hear your feedback because it's coming from this lens of, the before, right? So this was in 2016. Some of the recommendations, again, in regards to community outreach, which is a huge part of coordinated specialty care, was using webinars and virtual platforms. So having a meeting that might not even be related to coordinated specialty care, but sliding it in, talking about this program that we have in the community. It also talked about looking at clinical supervision, looking at consultation. And one thing that I know many of you have been doing is regular team meetings. So you've been having regular team meetings, everyone in their own space. And for what I've seen, many of you have been doing that very, very well. Again, something that I know you have been doing is the video telecommunications, and then also using audio. I recognize that everyone's not comfortable with the video, and so may not be the ideal choice for everyone, but have been able to engage some individuals through using the telephone. And I did think it was interesting, so be more tele-education, but some of you need a license or you need a certification to be able to do your job. So also looking at opportunities for, wanting to build the team up, wanting to build capacity. Is there opportunity to be able to reach individuals that maybe you wouldn't be able to reach before, doing that again through a virtual platform. Again, that leads us to tele-education, creation of learning communities, just looking at as maybe a group of supported education, employment specialists want to get together, a group of peer support specialists want to get together. So being able to use technology to come together, or maybe, versus a time where, yeah, could have done it, but it would have taken more resources to be able to drive somewhere and for the whole group to get together. Now looking at doing that through a virtual format. And then the technology, and we're looking at, again, questions, answers, shared knowledge. That is something that we've been doing ongoing through Project ECHO. So again, just would be interested in just hearing practices that have been effective. I think we did explore this, but that was probably 6 months ago. So what are some things that have been effective that you would want to continue? And then also looking at, what are some opportunities for growth, further development, things that just seem like they're just not going to work, or maybe some things that could be successful with some additional support. And the one thing that always stands out for me is the digital disparities, is that, again, oftentimes the references, they're written as if everyone has access to technology and everyone is physically located in a place that has an easy setup, easy connection. And I just know that that's not the case. So just would love your feedback on digital disparities. And that is the end of my presentation. As always, thank you for listening.